Okay, I formed up the reeds as I showed you in the video from a couple days ago, and they've been drying on these pegs for a while now. And they're still wrapped in their string, still on their original pegs that I formed them on. And today we're going to add the wires and wrap the back of the reed also. So I'll go through that process for you now. All of this I do with my forming mandrel. So I take it off of the peg that it dried on, I have it on my forming mandrel, and here's where, with that tail of the string, with that half hitch we tied the other day, I can start pulling on that to start unwrapping the string. Okay, and as I unwind that from behind, we're going to add the wires as we go up. Got my brass wire here. And I like the heavier pliers for this just because they're easier to hold on to. For the wire, I get about 3 finger widths of wire and cut that. And for each of these, I'm going to fold them over in 1/3, fold them over at the 1/3 mark. So I'll take the wire, find about where 1/3 is. So we've got 1/3 here, and then 2/3 folded in half. And I'll do that for each of these again. And that's just going to make it easier to put on the blank when I need them. Okay, so I'm going to wrap a little further than I need to, just give myself some space to work with. And then the way that I do this, which is the way that I was taught, is a little odd because I end up tightening the wires backwards. So instead of righty-tighty, I go lefty-tighty, which is wrong if you're used to tightening nuts and bolts and that sort of thing, or even just lids on jars. But that's the way I was taught, so it's pretty ingrained in my hands, and so that's how I continue to do it. So that's what I'm going to show you here. If you want to do it the other way, then you just reverse everything that I'm doing. But for my way of doing it, I'm holding the wire in my right hand. I've got the larger end of the wire down, and then I slide that over the reed. Now this first step, I put the larger lower end comes below, and I'm pinching here with my right hand, my thumb and forefinger, pinching pretty tightly up against the reed, and then I use my forefinger of my left hand here to smush the wire down and hold that. So now I've transferred the wire to the other hand. See, that's nice and tight. Bring the long end around like that. And here we can make our first twist. And so you see for me that's goes to the left. Okay, at this point, I haven't even measured. I've kind of eyeballed it. You can measure, if you're not used to doing this, you can measure beforehand with your ruler and mark with a pencil on the cane where to place the wires. I eyeball it and put it pretty loose, and then I tighten it. I measure when I tighten it later. Okay, so right now we're just got it snug enough that it's going to stay on the mandrel without sliding off. And we're going to unwrap some more of the string. At this point, I really could probably just take the string entirely off, but I leave it here until I get the second wire on. And we do the second wire the same way. I'm going to start with the third wire, the one that I already put on, up. So we want the wires facing in opposite directions. I'm going to wrap that wire around, pinch with my first finger, transfer the wire to my other hand, and twist. Still quite loose, still can move them by hand. Okay, and at this point I can get rid of this string together. So I'll do that from the tip of the reed here. Okay. And now I'm going to just place the first wire, and then we'll start tightening things up. So, second wire facing me. And then same process as before. Okay, so I've got my wires on there cut pretty roughly, and now we're going to work on tightening them up. I want my third wire just a little tighter so it'll actually stay where I place it. Okay. So measuring from the back of the reed, I put my wires at 1/4 of an inch, 3/4 of an inch, and 1 inch and 3/32. So we want to make sure that the wires are close. There's no gap between the wires here. Okay, and I'm going to double check that measurement. They will tend to stay tighter together as you tighten the wire also. There we go. Okay, so I've got that pretty much where it needs to be. As we tighten the wires, a really important point to this is to pull the wire out and then twist. If you just twist from right here and don't pull to create that space first, you're going to actually stress the wire right where that twist is and you'll end up breaking it. So let's see if I can demonstrate that a little better with this one. So pulling out, you can see it creates that little gap in there, and then twist to take up the space. Okay, check my measurements again. And then at this point I can move things around if I need to. So my middle wire is just a bit low. I'm going to scooch that up just a touch. Check again. That's better for all of them. Third wire could be a little higher. Okay, that's good. So at this point we want to finish tightening our wires. Third wire is going to be the tightest of the three. Middle wire is fairly tight. And our first wire, snug, I would say, but not too tight. At this point I can get rid of the extra tails. And here's where we want to make sure that the wires are tight against the tube of the reed. So I'll take the reed off the mandrel, and I'm going to check this third wire especially and see if I can spin it. So that spins a little bit, so it's not quite tight enough. Second wire is getting there. First wire is certainly good. Okay, so I put that back on the mandrel gently, and then I'm going to tighten up this third wire a bit more. Pulling with pretty good bit of strength. You can see the knuckles on my left hand here getting kind of weight. So I'm pulling pretty hard for that third wire. Middle wire, not as much, just snug. Okay, so that wiggles just a bit. That wiggles basically not at all. And the first wire just a bit also. Again, double checking this. Okay, it's still spinning just a bit. So one last time here. Pulling out, then twisting it back in. And we're tight, so we're good. All right, so at this point we've got our wires set. And we're gonna wrap it with string. There are a couple of different options here. I use two different ones depending on what the purpose of the reeds are for. If the reeds are for me to use, I use a heavier grade string, heavier grade, a thicker string, because it's faster to wrap for me, and I don't actually coat mine in glue. So for my own reeds, I use this number 3, size 3 crochet thread. Okay, it's pretty large, which means it wraps really quickly, which I like because I don't like taking forever to make reeds. So I can wrap a reed pretty quickly with this string. And then I don't coat it in glue. And I don't do that because I find that not coating, especially this heavy string in glue, means that they dry out faster and more completely between playings. And I've found that not using the glue actually allows my reeds to last a good bit longer, which I think is because they dry out more in between playing. So there's less time where the tube of the reed is kept moist for bacteria to start growing. So that's what I do for my own reeds. Downside to that is that after a bit of playing and shrinking and expanding from soaking and drying, the back can get loose a bit when it's dry. It's fine when it's being after it's been soaked up, but when it's dry it can get loose. And for young students especially, that can be a problem because they tend to not be quite as careful with the reed, and it can kind of start to come apart on them. So for reeds that I'm using for my students, I'll use kind of a more traditional method where I'll use a thinner string, get this fun color changing string. I don't know what size it is because I don't have the label anymore. But this is closer to the size of a nylon string, but this is still cotton. And then I wrap it with that. And then I also coat it in glue. I do not use nylon. I like the fact that cotton is a little bit stretchy, and I feel it is less constrictive on the reed. And then for gluing, I use this airplane model cement called Sigment. It's M-E-N-T in the back there, that's gone. And the idea behind the string is something I picked up years and years ago when I went to the Glickman Poppin camp and learned reed making from Jim Poe there. So if you're familiar with any of his writing or teaching, this is based on how he makes his reeds. So I use a cotton string, and then if I'm going to glue it, I use this model airplane Sigment. So we're going to demonstrate how to wrap your reed now. This is going to be a student reed for sale, so I will go ahead and use my thinner string. To start the wrapping, I pinch the string over the wire and I just make a couple of wraps just to hold that string in place. Okay. Once I have that, nothing pretty about that. We haven't started to actually make the actual wrapping yet. So that's just to hold it so it doesn't spin off or unravel on me. Now, as I'm wrapping, I'm going to follow the most recent string that I laid down. Okay, so I'm on the bottom. As I come up, cross over, and then I follow the top down. Cross over, come back up, cross, down, cross, and we just keep following the previous string. We get to the wire, just go around it whenever it makes sense to. And I'm holding pretty tight. Tends to be kind of painful on your hands if you're going to do a whole batch of these, because you want that wrapping to be nice and snug. For me, a lot of this is cosmetic. You can kind of do as large or as small wrapping as you want. It's helpful in that it gives you something to hold on to when you're putting the reed on and off the bocal. I've heard people say that the larger the wrapping, the more likely if you drop your reed that you're going to hit that and not break the tip. Don't know if there's a shred of truth to that. So whatever makes you happy here is fine. Or if you're using color changing thread, you can go based on that and decide when you like what color it is. Case in point, we're getting to green, so I'm going to go ahead and take that opportunity to wrap up the tube. So just, again, following my most recent piece of string, most recent wrapping. Okay, and at this point we get close to the wire, about one or two string widths away, and we need to tie it off. So we're going to tie this off much the same way we tied off that white string when we were forming the reed. I'm going to do that by forming a couple of half hitches. So first way that I'm going to do that, I have my thumb here. Okay, and I'm going to create a loop by turning my thumb outward away from the reed. Let's try that again. So outward creates this loop, and I place that over the top of the reed. And I pull that tight. That's only half of it. Now, taking the string, and I turn it inward, and then again over the top of the reed. Make sure it gets on the right side of the wire, pull that tight, and now that should hold it in place. Whether you're going to put a wire, whether you're going to glue it or not, that'll hold for the life of the reed. I'm going to cut that. Again, since this is a student reed, I'm going to glue it. Before I do that, I'm going to just cut this third wire off. Sometimes, again, for these student reeds, I cut that, or I bend it over first and then wrap over the top of it. Sometimes I cut it off later and then just blunt the edge there so it's not too sharp. And then we go ahead and glue. Just going to get a rough coat on here. Especially with this Signet, it really doesn't matter how nice this does or does not look. When it dries, it flattens out. I use 2 coats of Signet. The first one ends up with kind of a rough matte finish. And then when you put on the second coat, it, again, even if it goes all kind of gloopy the way this is, it'll dry smooth. And the second one will have more of a glossy finish. And you'll end up with something, hey look, same colors, along the lines of that. All right, happy reed making.